I'm Amy Morgan, the feature writer for the Marriage Initiative, and I'm just delighted today to introduce pastor and counselor Chris and Jen Coursey to you. The Courseys are leaders and designers of the Thrive training programs, which combine neuroscience with the redemptive power of the Holy Spirit. These programs allowed Chris to better walk with people on their healing journey as a counselor. They describe how joyous feelings can and must be created for relational well-being. Their resources, like their Thrive training courses, podcasts, and books, The 4 Habits of Joy-Filled Marriages, and The Joy Switch, give people the skills to learn how. Chris and Jen, thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having us.
Yeah. I noticed you've got your books right there. There are 4 habits right behind you. That's great.
Yep, that's right. Little practical books right there.
Yeah, well, I want to hear about them. But first, what is joy? I think we all of us would like to know what your definition is.
Yeah, so joy means that we're glad to be together. Joy is what we like to call relational happiness. Joy is when you feel like you're the sparkle in someone else's eyes. So you walk into that room and you see someone light up because it's you that just walked in. And we feel that joy. So joy is just you are that sparkle in another person's eyes, and we feel that.
Why is that important?
Yeah, joy actually does a lot of things. A lot of brain research has really kind of teased out a little more. What is this joy stuff, and why is it such a good fuel? So one of the things that joy does is joy creates a bond in our marriage. So, right, people can think about their wedding day. They can think about maybe their honeymoon, and joy gives us strength. So joy gives us strength to bounce back from the hard stuff. Joy gives us strength to be relational when things go wrong. And joy really draws us together. Like we like to be around those that are glad to be with us, and we're glad to be with them. So it's an important ingredient for relationships, especially in our marriage, but also in our communities and our spiritual communities.
Yeah. I was sharing that after we had talked and I read some of your work. I was sharing that with some people, even at the gym. Yeah, like you said, even just any relationship. I was noticing how the trainer, she had that sparkle and how she was going to each person personally and, just kind of looking in their eye with a smile on her face, little quick interaction. But and I mentioned it to her later. I said, you were building joy. Why else do people like to go to the gym?
Right? Exactly. But I love that example because you felt that. You saw joy. Joy actually, a lot of what makes up joy is our nonverbal. So it's the facial expressions, it's the voice tone, it's the movements, the gestures that we make. So you saw the trainer really connecting, and you saw joy, and we feel that.
Yeah. Why do they need that? You kind of talked about that brain research, but help us understand this because I think this is kind of new news for some of us. I mean, we kind of get that smiling, looking at each other, feeling warm and relational, but there's more behind it than just kind of ooey gooey soft stuff, right?
You're exactly right. Joy sets the limits on our ability to handle the hard stuff. So what that means is I came at this initially from a trauma recovery perspective. And so working with people who've had some hard stuff happen in life, or maybe they just didn't get some of the good stuff that they needed. So what we discovered was joy helped people not only stay their relational selves, but it helped them recover when they were trying to get some of the rocks out of their shoes, so to speak, in their healing journeys. Joy gave people strength. So building some joyful community, improving and increasing joy levels in their families, what that did is it actually gave them strength to be able to work through the hard stuff and not get so knocked over by the waves of life that sometimes hit us in our relationships.
Yeah. And now some of the research said that a lot of times people build these skills or they develop kind of looking for joy. Help me explain that better. It's something that children usually start with, correct? Help me say that better. You're the expert.
Yeah, you want to share some?
Sure. So, really, ideally, in childhood, we learn a lot of these skills. We learn a lot of them in very, very early childhood, before we're even 2 years old or 3 years old, where a lot of these patterns are being set, and we're building a foundation for life in that early, early years. And so, joy is really crucial for our brain development, for for growing children, for growing brains. And ideally, we learn these skills in that early childhood, and then we can continue practicing them and strengthening them for life. But getting those set in early childhood helps us have them for life. Unfortunately, some families don't have all of those skills to pass on to their kids, and if you don't have it, you can't pass it on. If you don't know how to play the violin, you can't teach somebody else to play the violin. So if you don't have the skill, you don't have it to pass on. And so then there's gaps sometimes in what we learn in childhood, and it shows up later in life, in our adult lives.
Yeah, and we were really excited working with a guy by the name of Dr. Jim Wilder. He's one of the fellows that brought out a lot of this brain research when we first came across the material in the 1990s. And what we discovered was that there's growth spurts for joy. So like a 9-month-old is the best window in the lifespan to grow joy. And as Jen said, some of us, our families just didn't have it. So the good news is we can grow joy later in life, but there are windows where joy's just going to blossom. And many parents can just remember those times when kiddos were young and they just want to look at you and build some joy. And it's a high energy, it's a very euphoric experience for infants and children. And even newborns, hours old, recognize their mother's scent. So joy is very personal. Joy is a relationship, like, hey, you're my people and I like being with you. And so we take the presence of joy very personally. We like to feel like people are glad to be with us. People are glad to see us. And the living God is glad to be with his people.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up God, because that's one thing as an ordained pastor, when you started, working with Jim Wilder and understanding this brain research, you really wanted to vet it against the word of God. And you really found a connection between relational joy between people and relational joy in God. Could you describe that? Because I think our marriage champions would be interested to know about that.
Yeah, there's a lot in the scriptures about joy. And it's a thread woven throughout the Bible. And so joy is a relational response. So it's when we are with someone. If you think about Adam and Eve in the garden, they walked with God in the cool of the day. And a lot of joy is expressed visually. And so what that means is when you see a face, when you see a face that lights up to see you, you experience, wow, this is somebody's glad to be with me. So it's interesting if you look at the Bible, especially the role in the Old Testament of having God's face. From the Aaronic benediction, it's about God's face and it's God's countenance.
Yeah, shine upon you. Yes,
that's it. And that's really describing joy. And that's the blessing of all blessings for the priest in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
It was a rabbinical blessing. Jesus would have done that blessing as well. And it's all about God's face. And so the thing that was exciting for me was just looking at the pages of the Bible with this relational lens, because I would think biblically. So it's like, okay, I wonder what the Bible has to say about this. And it was a fun, fascinating study. There's just so much gold in these hills as we start to look at scripture from a relational perspective. Like salvation's a relationship with the living God. The good shepherd is glad to be with his sheep. Jesus talked about the disciples having his joy and having it to the full. And it's in so many wonderful places. And it's like, okay, I think this joy thing actually there's something here. And it is the fruit of the Spirit as well. So this is like in God's garden, you will see joy growing there amongst all the other trees.
Well, thank you so much. That really, as you were saying, the Lord bless you and keep, I was like, oh, wow. Yes, he shines his face. That really brings it home. Yeah. Oh, gosh. So when you started thinking about that and the research, you just mentioned, ideally, people learn these skills as a child. They learn how to give joy. They learn how to receive joy. They're wired to need it. But if something has happened in the wire, it's going to break down. I would imagine it would break down in people's marriages, but it kind of first starts breaking down just even in their own selves. What did you do? What did you find? Can people learn these skills later?
Yeah, that's the exciting part. God is a God of resurrection. And even,
Mm.
Jen and I came into this, we didn't have these skills. We didn't actually have a lot of joy, even though I had a great education, loving family, all of these good things. There wasn't a lot of joy there. So the good news is there are ways to increase joy, and that's actually what we were a part of working with Jim Wilder, was creating exercises so that couples and families can start to grow some joy. And so at our trainings, we would do a lot of like interactive exercises. So it's a little bit of talking about joy, but we would do a lot to give couples practices where they remember joy, they share some joy. Because joy is best grown visually, we would do exercises where you're building joy with your spouse, and watching people grow joy is just, it's like the best thing. You start seeing smiles, you start seeing
Yeah.
tears, you start seeing hugs. It's like people just start coming alive. And it's an amazing thing to watch. And we just finished a marriage treat this past weekend, and just watching couples build joy. And some of the couples come into our retreats and trainings like, I don't know about this joy stuff, and which is very common. And then it's like, well, let's just watch what happens as you practice these exercises. And you just watch couples come alive and remember that, wow, yes, I wanted to marry my spouse because I had more joy when I was with my spouse than apart. So we can train our brain to run on joy. In fact, the part of your brain that really grows joy in the frontal right hemisphere here, it grows throughout the lifespan, and it grows in response to a face that lights up to see you. So every time you see a face light up to see you, your mostly nonverbal part of your brain here responds. And just like going to the gym, you go into the gym with your trainer, this part of the brain grows in response to joy-filled relationships.
That is so neat and so encouraging, like you said, that it can continue even if somebody didn't have that foundation. And that is so surprising to me. And I would imagine anybody of our marriage champions watching to think that you were not a joyous person, because you are you are very joyous now. And
Yeah.
wow,
Yep.
could you?
Joy became part of my character.
Yeah. Very much, both of you. And could you explain or describe an exercise? And then I'm going to tell you now, I may throw you on the spot since
Okay.
you're both there.
Yep.
I may have you demonstrate it, because you can demonstrate one of them in
Yeah.
like 30 seconds, right?
Oh yeah, easily. Yeah.
Okay. And that wouldn't be too creepy since I'm giving you a
No,
little bit of advance.
we like building some joy together.
There you go.
Yep. So, one of the practical ways we would have couples build some joy is we first have them get relational. And so part of how you get your brain in relational mode is you remember joy. So we might say, hey, think about something that you really enjoy about your spouse. Think about a special moment that you had together. And I give people a few moments to just think about that. And then we basically give people practicing what we call connecting and resting. We call them joy smiles. So you look at your spouse and you're glad to be together. And when the joy peaks, it's time for some rest, because joy should always lead to rest. So we have couples share these joy smiles where they connect and then they rest, and then they connect and then they rest. And as couples start to practice this, the first one's a little clunky because they're just getting used to it. Like,
that's what my husband said when I started smiling.
Yeah. It's like, what is this here? And I tell people it's not a stare down contest. What we're trying to do is help couples learn when the joy peaks, it's time for rest. Otherwise, even joy can be a little overwhelming if we don't rest. So we connect and then we rest. And it's it's nonverbal. So it's a little nonverbal dance. Connect and rest. And after they try it a few times, they're like, oh, this wasn't so bad. Like, I kind of like this.
Well, and one of the surprising things is how quick those connection and rest times are, because again, we're looking for like a peak. So if you think of a mountain, climbing a mountain, when you hit the top, there might be a plateau, there might be a flat meadow, but we actually, if we're not still climbing, then we're going to take a break and rest so that we can do it again. So we're kind of going up and down. So they're real brief little interactions.
Yeah, they are. And if you've ever seen an infant, they build lots of joy, but they always look away. They avert their gaze. And so that's when we rest, which sets us up for more joy. So it's this little dance of joy and rest, joy and rest. And we tell couples, just start noticing when you need that breather, or it looks like your spouse needs that breather. It's time to just take a little pause, rest, and then when you're ready, build some more joy.
Okay, can you demonstrate a little
Yeah.
joy smile
Yep.
exercise real
All
quick?
right. So we'll demonstrate this connecting and this resting together. All right. So here we go. So we rest, and then we connect in joy,
I love it.
and we rest, and then we connect. And just, I mean, that's that simple.
Yeah,
And
I love it.
you just feel it when you do it. And the key is just connecting and resting, and just you notice how that feels. And just doing that, like, oh, I like being with this person. This is someone who I care about deeply, and I love, and I like to build some joy. In a sense, it's a very intimate exercise, even though it feels a little clunky in the beginning.
Well, thank you for sharing it with us. That was it's a good demonstration, so people can kind of get what that means, and
Yeah.
and looks like, and it doesn't have to be awkward and scary. I mean, if it's a little awkward, it doesn't have to be scary.
Yeah, that's right. And I tell people the key to that really is just taking a moment to get relational, because if your brain's not in a relational mode,
Yes.
then it feels like, why am I doing this strange exercise? But when we get relational, that's when your brain wants to really amplify joy. So that's why we think about a special moment, a special memory. We think about the good stuff, which gets our brain in a relational state, which means we're primed for joy. And that really sets the tone for sharing some joy with our spouse.
And getting back to the theological application too, you had mentioned that that's the look Jesus is going to have on his face when we see him.
You know what? That's exactly right. I often ask couples, I'll say, when you get to heaven, what do you think is going to be on Jesus's face when he greets you?
Yeah.
And we all like, oh, well, it's joy. And I often tell people there's no accident that a picture or image of joy in the scriptures is wine. A cup of wine is a picture of joy. It's no accident that Jesus turned water into wine, which would have been about 400 bottles of wine by today's standards. He created a lot of wine. And the people at the wedding in Cana said, this is like the best wine I've ever had. This is amazing. It's like that's a taste of heaven. So joy is meant to be a taste of heaven, and we have a God whose face lights up to be with his people. That's a big deal.
I love that. Well, as you were developing these skills and that became your Thrive training, and you have different ways couples and people can take the Thrive training. In fact, you guys met working out the details of a Thrive training, right?
We did Thrive. It's been kind of fun. That's like such a big part of our marriage is not only doing the training, but it's practicing the exercises ourselves. Like once we created the training, we went through the training as well. Once we had enough people who could lead the tracks, we went through it and just had a blast.
Oh, well, tell us about that. Tell how our marriage champions could connect with you and come to a training, and because you have different formats.
We do. We have a number of different options. Our website's thrivetoday.org. And so we have our 5-day is like our premium training. If that's for the people who are really like, I'm serious about using this and spreading this. But we have 1-2-day versions of Thrive. We have, our books and our resources contain a lot of practices. So the 4 Habits books, and I have a book called The Joy Switch, which talks about getting in that relational state to build some joy. There's exercises woven throughout those resources so people can actually practice some exercises.
And we also have online courses, what we call habit builder courses. And so these are courses where people can actually, there's a little bit of teaching, a little bit of introduction for each practice, but then they're all practices. So you're building a habit over 28 times of practicing joy or practicing remembered joy or those types of things.
Yeah.
And we also have a podcast, which is really fun. It's just stories of people using these type of relational skills in daily life. So people can kind of have a picture of what would that look like? What could things look like? How could it be a little bit different?
Yeah, well, and I love that because when I was trying to figure out how to explain it, I came up with a visual from a movie where people were greeting each other at the airport, and
Oh,
it, and that really resonated with me because I remembered it because they do a whole montage at the beginning of people greeting each other in joy, and it's popular when people watch around Christmas, and people are probably thinking about it, but it just I was like, okay. And then when you think of people telling their stories, I mean, that would be very inspirational.
you know what? It really is. And we have a lot of the times for couples who want to build joy, we'll have them share stories of the joyful moments from their wedding or their honeymoon or from their week. And when your brain thinks of a story, a joyful story, you basically, um, your brain responds as though you went back in time and you're reliving the moment all over again. So
Yeah.
remembering it, feeling it, and sharing it are ways that you actually really can grow some joy, and you prime your brain for amplifying more joy. So those stories are a powerful thing.
I think about when my husband and I are together sometimes, with our grown sons, and we'll be meeting new people or whatever, and how you tell someone like the funny story from your wedding where our candles got lit our tablecloths on fire.
Oh,
And we think it's funny now. I mean,
yeah.
we actually kind of thought it was funny then because we didn't at that point, we didn't it's been, 29 years, but
Oh, yeah.
those funny stories are how we got locked out the first night of our honeymoon. And our boys know these stories, and
Yeah.
and as you tell them, so that I can see how that would really resonate with people.
Oh, I tell people the stories keep the flames of joy alive. And so sharing those stories with each other, with our family, with friends, like that actually there's a lot of benefits in the brain to sharing those stories. And yeah, it just kind of keeps those flames of joy going.
Well, you talk about what happens when couples don't flame, and you had a term for it, the joy gap.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. What is that? Because I would imagine there are that more than one that have a joy gap.
Yeah, you know what? One of the pictures we use in our Four Habits of Joy-Filled Marriages book is this image of a joy gap. And what a joy gap is this the distance between moments of shared joy. And so ideally we have this very short gap because we're growing joy in our marriage. We're doing things that spark joy. But when we're not growing joy, there's a lot more distance or time between those moments of shared joy. And the gap gets bigger. And when the gap gets bigger, then the weeds of fear start to crop up. And the absence of joy is actually very painful. And so people feel like they're falling out of love when they don't have a lot of joy. So the thing about building joy in your marriage is it actually deepens and strengthens the bond, and it helps to keep you the best relational version of yourself so that you not only grow joy, but you learn how to get back to joy when you've lost your joy. So
Yeah.
the joy gap is something that we want to shrink the joy gap, and joy is just the thing that helps to shrink that gap.
Yeah, you talked about fear. I remember that was something that you talked about before, that with people without joy, that's the kind of the default emotion.
Yeah, you know what? This is such a big deal that I like to share this with people, that your brain is always joy. It's always looking for a face to share some joy with. When you go out, you're running errands, you go to the bank, the store, you have that
Yeah.
that teller that you enjoy seeing, and
Yeah.
you feel some joy when you see that person. When you're not running on the fuel of joy, then what happens is your brain starts scanning for threats. So instead of scanning for a face that I can share joy with and be glad to be with someone, then your brain starts to scan for threats. And what do I have to be worried about here? What do I have to guard myself from? And so what happens is either joy is going to grow or fear is going to grow. Like fear
Yeah.
also can get bigger and bigger, just like joy. So the good thing is when we're actively and proactively growing joy, it actually turns the volume down on fear in our brain as a motivator.
Oh, wow. I mean, reason enough to be
Yeah.
practicing some joy. Well, tell me about your four habits of joy-filled marriage. There are habits, and as you were pointing, what are they? How do we do them?
Yes. Yeah. In our our marriage book, we have something we call plan. And so this stands for the four habits of play together, listen for emotions, appreciate daily, and nurture a rhythm. And so play together just means your brain's wired for play. Play is one of the ways, we have a date night we try to do regularly and try to do something fun on our date night, or we play games sometimes with the family. Play is one of the ways you spark some joy. And there's a lot of good things that, we can do to grow some joy through playing together, not being childish, but being childlike. A big difference, and just helping couples like add some play into your marriage. And then listening for emotions just means what I'm doing. If I'm not listening for emotions, then I'm listening for problems. So if my wife is sharing about something that she might be struggling with, if I'm listening for emotions, I can say, wow, I hear that you're really bothered by this. You're sad about this. You're really mad with me about this. But if I'm listening for problems, I'm just trying to solve problems, and she's not going to feel seen, heard, and understood. So we learn to listen for what is somebody feeling here as they share with me. And appreciate daily is just what we call the package joy is appreciation. So these are gifts that we unwrap. So when we remember those times of joy, and you do this on a regular basis, that's part of how you train your brain to run on joy. You remember it, you share it in those stories. And then nurturing a rhythm just means we notice, is it time to connect or is it time to rest? What time is it? Is it time for some joy? Or if we're both tired, we're probably not going to build joy very well. So maybe we should rest together. So we just notice, what time is it? Is it time for me to talk or time for me to listen? Is it time for joy or is it time for rest? So those are very practical habits, and we have lots of exercises in the book that people can practice those.
I love it. And then you kind of have a shorter version, which is the 30 days of joy for busy married couples. You called it a little campfire, starting a little campfire of joy.
Yes, this is one of our fun books as well. Just 30 days of joy exercises. And this was a resource we created to go with our marriage retreats, where basically it's just exercises, and we share kind of our thoughts and observations from doing the exercise ourselves. So what it does, it's like, how do we get those flames of joy going and growing here in our marriage? And again, if you're not used to the exercises, like the joy smiles, it might feel a little strange, but they work. I always tell people the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah.
And honestly, there's exercises in the 4 Habits of Joy-Filled Marriage too. And even more than the knowledge and understanding of the teaching parts, it's the exercises and the practices that make the difference, that shrink the joy gap, that bring those shared joy moments to life.
Yeah, that's where the gold is.
It's like it does not just in the head. You have to,
Right.
It needs to actually be. Well, let's talk about the Joy Switch, because that's your newest book.
Yeah.
And I think you're talking a little bit about those getting in the relational stage, but can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, the joy switch really is how to notice if your brain is in the relational spot where joy can grow, or if you're in the non-relational spot, what my friend Jim Wilder would call enemy mode. So the joy switch is, okay, how do I get relational, and what can I do to grow some joy? Because if your brain's in enemy mode, you're not going to grow a lot of joy in enemy mode, right? Because you're focused on problems or winning or, arguments and stuff. So the joy switch is just, how can I get relational and grow some joy and practice some joy in my life? And there's 19 exercises in that book as well, just to start practicing. Am I relational or am I in enemy mode? How do I get out of enemy mode and get into relational mode and build some joy?
How do you get out of enemy mode? Because again, our spouse is not our enemy, right? There is an enemy, but it's not our spouse.
You're exactly right.
But sometimes it feels like it, doesn't it?
Yeah,
There are moments where it feels like you are not on my side right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
The death stare.
Yes. Yep. That's right. And we all have, we have those moments. So part of the shift happens from noticing, wow, am I in a relational mode? Have I slipped into enemy mode where I'm amplifying pain or problems?
Yeah.
So we learn to recognize it and then discuss, like, what helps you get back into relational mode. So I found it doesn't help Jen if I just say, honey, you're in enemy mode. That doesn't do a whole lot to help her get out.
Yes, I am.
Right? So I might say, what we found is when we slip into enemy mode, we just need a breather. So we might take a moment to just catch our breath and rest, or we might, take a moment to focus on appreciation and reflect on God's gifts for a few moments. So just noticing it. And some people need the quiet. Some people, need to move. Some people need some joy to help them get relational again. So it's just noticing it and getting out of enemy mode. And appreciation tends to be one of the best ways for a lot of people. Like, just if you can look at pictures on your phone of your kids or your family or your friends, or remember special moments from your life, what that does is that helps you get out of enemy mode.
Yeah. Do you need to verbalize the appreciation, or just is it enough just to even think about it?
For a lot of us in those moments, thinking about it, the goal is to feel it. And so as I think about it, I want to try to feel it in my body. And we normally tell people about 3 minutes is a good goal. Can I feel some appreciation for about 3 minutes? And then notice, okay, I feel like I'm back. I'm out of enemy mode here. We can share the appreciation at that point, and then that will actually help us to stay in relational mode. But the goal, at least initially, is to be able to think about it, and feel it. That's the key. It's like chewing bubble gum. As long as there's some flavor as I remember it, that's going to help me get out of enemy mode.
I love that bubblegum analogy. I was thinking almost perhaps it might be different if somebody's an introvert or an extrovert.
It is.
You
Yeah,
know,
I'm an
because my
introvert.
first thought
Yeah.
was talking.
Yeah.
You can imagine what I am.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that we relate to that, because I am an introvert. Jen, connection helps her get out of enemy mode. But for me, I often need a little bit of space, a little bit of rest. So just even being able to understand that, and I tell couples, talk about it when you're in relational mode. What helps? What do you need when you go into enemy mode? And let's start talking about these things and figuring out what helps and what doesn't.
One of your rhythms.
What are your rhythms? That's right. Exactly.
Well, Chris and Jen, it was so great to talk with you. I've been practicing some of these joy building exercises, and I really appreciate, I know our marriage champions are grateful too for your resources and for getting to know you.
Well, thank you. I love your questions and your heart. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Well, as always, marriage champions, if you'd like more information about the Courseys and their Thrive training, you can find us at marriageinitiative.org.